Flying is claimed to be the safest form of travel, but when something goes wrong, the chances are it's serious. Tonight, every air traveler's worst nightmare.
That's a full-blown emergency of almost unheard of proportions.
The most terrifying in-flight movies captured on camera, shot by bystanders and the passengers themselves. We'll hear from horrified eyewitnesses.
A plane isn't supposed to be on fire.
And travelers faced with life or death choices.
Get off this plane now!
This is World's Scariest Flights. Air travel is an integral part of modern life. More than 30,000 flights take to the air every single day. And every day, millions of passengers pray that nothing will go wrong.
You've got this gigantic aluminium tube. You're probably not very comfortable. You're crammed in there, like it's a train in the rush hour. And the thing is dashing along at 500 miles an hour. Those are the sorts of things that understandably cause people concern.
But if these fears become reality, just what can a passenger do?
As a pilot, my biggest single piece of advice to you would be, please pay attention to the safety demonstration.
So it's heads down and brace yourself for an emergency landing. That thin aluminium tube is now screaming along the runway in a shower of flames. Our countdown begins with a captain forced to land like a stunt pilot because of a dangerous human error. August 1989. This Piedmont Airlines 737 has been diverted from Charlotte, North Carolina to the quieter regional airport of Greensboro. If something goes wrong, the emergency crews there should have a better chance of dealing with it. The reason? The left-hand landing gear is stuck inside the undercarriage, jammed by a wheel chock accidentally left inside the wheel well by ground crew. To lessen the chance of explosion, the pilot has spent the past 2 hours burning off fuel as the crew struggle with the problem, but to no avail. As a last resort, pilot Larry Fuda tries a daring and unconventional maneuver to solve the problem. He slams the plane down onto the runway in the hope that it will dislodge the jammed wheel. All 106 people on board hold their breath. But his desperate attempt fails, and with only 15 minutes of fuel remaining, he's forced to land on the other wheels.
When you have that type of a landing gear problem, when the wheels hit the runway, what the pilot's trying to do, number one, is balance a little bit on that side where the gear's down so that the wingtip on the opposite side will stay off of the runway for as long as possible, because it could catch when it's on the ground and it could spin the aircraft in a direction they don't want to go.
Captain Fuda keeps the plane level for as long as possible. But inevitably, the left engine pod hits the tarmac, trailing sparks and smoke along the runway. The plane eventually skids to a stop, and as emergency crews race to the scene, the passengers evacuate using the emergency chutes. Incredibly, no one on board was injured. Landing is testing for the pilot at the best of times. But how much more dangerous is a full-blown emergency playing out in the dead of night? Friends and colleagues Chase Benzenberg and Alessandro Albera were on their way back from a business trip when a routine flight nearly became their last. Flight 4951 from Atlanta, Georgia to White Plains, New York had passed without incident until it approached its final destination.
Toward the time where we knew we were supposed to be landing, we were circling the airport. I had a window seat, so I was able to actually see the lights of Westchester Airport, and I'm making a joke to Chase, saying, I don't think he could find the landing strip.
At some point when we were circling so much, we're wondering what's happening, and we got the answer. We heard the flight attendant, walking from the front to the back past us. She said we're going to be making an emergency landing. And that was it. That's all we heard, was that we're making an emergency landing.
Immediately after hearing that, people are just getting really nervous. People want to know what's going on.
What they don't realize is there's a malfunction of the landing gear. One set of wheels is stuck in the hold. The plane's redirected to New York's JFK, where the longer runway means more chance of surviving the emergency landing.
We're thinking, okay, how bad is this going to be? Because I'm envisioning the plane flipping over, bursting into flames.
I got nervous. There's a lot of people in this world that I hadn't said anything to. I hadn't said bye to people. I don't want anything bad to happen to myself, to anybody else on the plane.
The flight to JFK has burnt up some of the fuel, but the seriousness of the situation becomes clear as the crew communicate with emergency services on the ground.
Rescue 1, there are 64 souls on board and 3,000 pounds of fuel.
We're down 51, roger. Yeah, that'll work.
As Chase and Alessandro start to film what could be their last ever landing, the pilot makes the announcement they all fear.
Brace for impact.
You cut the tension with a knife in that fuselage. Everybody was praying, and I think a lot of people thought it was the end there.
People were freaking out. People were really in a bad state, scared for their lives also.
Heads down, stay down! Heads down, stay down!
You hear the audio and the video of the flight attendant going through protocol, I guess it is, shouting, heads down, stay down, the whole time. And so it's almost like a drill sergeant, yelling at you to do this.
As the flight attendant shouts her emergency instructions, one set of wheels touches down. Seconds later, the opposite wingtip hits the runway, showering it with white-hot metal sparks.
Seeing sparks was pretty real. Made it all pretty real. The sparks were crazy. It was bright. You could feel heat. It was that close to me.
We were just hoping that it wasn't going to be a full-blown fire.
When it just came to a stop, just a sigh of relief. Like, wow, that could have been a lot worse. We're still here.
Despite major damage to the wing, all 64 souls on board are able to walk away uninjured and show their gratitude to the pilot.
I was glad that he was our pilot, and it was good to see him still being so cool and calm, given the light of the situation. And I did get to shake the pilot's hand. So.
We were pushed off of the tarmac, and we just kind of turned around, and you look over at this huge airplane just tipped over, and it's like, wow, we made it. Cool.
Coming up, an emergency landing so unbelievable, it isn't even in the pilot's training manual.
You could hear even in the captain's voice, the sense of urgency, like, brace for impact, get ready.
I prepare myself to die.
So far on World's Scariest Flights, we've seen some terrifying landings. But this next emergency is in a class of its own.
There comes a time on occasion when the situation faced by the flight crew isn't in the rule book, wasn't in the training manual, yet they have to deal with it and somehow or another figure it out.
It's the evening of the 1st of November 2011. LOT Polish Airlines Flight 016 from Newark, New Jersey to Warsaw is in big trouble. The problem begins just 20 minutes after departing Newark, when an alarm sounds in the Boeing 767's cockpit. There's a major malfunction in the central hydraulics, but to make matters worse, the alternative electrical system has also failed, leaving the entire landing gear stuck inside the belly of the plane. At the controls is 54-year-old Captain Tadeusz Wrona, a pilot with more than 15,000 hours in the air.
was first malfunction with hydraulics, which happened during my career.
With no immediate solution to the problem, Captain Wrona decides to proceed with the 9-hour journey to Warsaw, all the while struggling to get the hydraulics to work. For the 220 passengers on board, like Greg Cohen on his way to Moscow to promote a boxing match, this is just a routine flight, so far.
When you're in my business, you travel all the time, we do a lot of fights internationally, and it was par for the course.
1 hour from Warsaw, the crisis on the flight deck is coming to a head. Unable to find a solution, Captain Wrona is faced with putting the 100-ton 767 down without any landing gear. It's a high-stress maneuver fraught with danger.
Now this crew is faced with extremely unusual circumstances. A pilot does not train for a gear-up landing. That's a full-blown emergency of almost unheard-of proportions.
It's a problem so rare that no pilot would ever train for this in a real plane. But Captain Wrona and his colleagues have tried this out in the simulator. The results weren't encouraging.
All landings with no gears is ended by crash, so...
The calm in the passenger cabin is shattered when Captain Wrona makes a chilling announcement.
The only thing the pilot said, and it was, you know, a little creepy, was, "We're going to make an emergency landing." You start thinking about, you know, your family and, you know, oh my God, you know, I might never see them again. I don't care how calm or cool you are, that's, you know, that's pretty heavy stuff.
Further back in the cabin, Miami resident Alex Ryszko is en route to Poland to visit his terminally ill brother. Fearing the worst, Alex begins to film on his mobile phone.
I cried for a while. I said goodbye to my children, and I was thinking, this is it. I prepare myself to die.
Captain Wrona is now moments from landing 231 terrified passengers and crew in an aircraft without any functioning landing gear.
The important thing on the wheels-up landing is to slide to a halt, maintaining the runway centerline. If an engine pod or the wingtip digs into soft ground, that can cartwheel the aeroplane around, and that will be a disaster.
The touching must be precision as possible, because there was no second chance.
You could hear even in the captain's voice, you know, the sense of urgency, like, you know, brace for impact, get ready, get ready. You know, I mean, you know, good or bad, it was a matter of seconds we were going to find out.
Even if he touches down without the plane breaking up, he'll have another problem to deal with: stopping the plane before it hits a motorway at the end of the runway. The flame retardant foam on the runway will stop fires, but it won't help stop the plane.
Nie modliliśmy się, aczkolwiek na pewno każdy z nas myślał, że jakaś pomoc z niemiec by się przydała. Tak to właśnie było.
Miraculously, he touches down right on the center line. But now, as the scraping engines give off sparks, there is a serious risk of explosion. Worse still, he can't engage the reverse thrusters to slow the plane, for fear of the engines igniting. And the plane is still skidding uncontrollably towards the road at the end of the runway. Finally, Captain Wrona brings the plane to a halt, completely intact.
We landed and it's smooth, and we are clapping, thinking that we are in perfect shape.
But as the 220 passengers applaud, they realize the danger is far from over.
Then the crew was like, get off this plane now. I mean, boom, and they tell you, don't take anything, just get off this plane now.
With the crew fearing an explosion from the still smoking engines, the passengers are running for their lives as they evacuate the plane.
And the guy screaming at us, run, 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 it's gonna blow up, run, run, it's gonna blow up. Then you're running as far as possible.
When I look back at the plane, that's when it really hit me. And, You know, it definitely got emotional. And I said, oh my God, you know, I mean, you know, this really could have been it.
And I was just thinking, I'm so lucky that we landed as we landed. I'm here and I'm alive.
Despite a critical technical failure, thanks to Captain Vrona and his co-pilot, not one of the 231 people on board was injured.
The airmanship that they exhibited was absolutely wonderful because the airplane is right where it needs to be. It's well flown. It's under good control. The touchdown is very soft. That's taking pilot experience and applying it in a way that they didn't expect to.
Captain Vrona's actions made him a hero in Poland, but his wife soon brought him down to earth.
After that, I made a phone call to my wife. I told her that I'm okay, and she answered that she's proud of me. It was the first time that she was proud of me.
But if passengers don't follow the in-flight safety instructions, sometimes not even the most skillful pilot can help them. Violent buffeting, wings wobbling, and sickening plunges mean you're in the grip of something that any regular flyer will have experienced: the terrifying weather phenomenon of turbulence.
I think turbulence is far and away the #1 concern of flyers, fearful flyers and even non-fearful flyers.
When it comes to turbulence, it's not like an in-flight movie. It's not entertaining. It gets people worried, and rightfully so.
Turbulence is caused by extreme changes in air pressure and wind direction, pockets of thin air causing the plane to drop suddenly, and violent updrafts forcing the plane back up. At its worst, the roller coaster ride of extreme turbulence can be horrific, but modern aircraft are built to withstand the huge forces involved. Usually, serious passenger injuries are avoided because either pilots are able to use weather radar to fly around bad weather and rough air, or they can give their passengers advance warning of the rough ride ahead and tell them to buckle up. But the most dangerous form of turbulence can strike, quite literally, out of the blue.
It's a situation we call clear air turbulence, and so the pilot will have no warning that there's going to be a turbulent event, so can't have the passengers go back to their seats and sit down.
I think every year in the U.S., somewhere around 25 or 30 people are injured by turbulence, and almost always it's because they were up and about when they should have been seated.
In extreme cases, unforeseen clear air turbulence can be a killer. December 1997, United Airlines Flight 826 from Narita, Japan to Hawaii has been forced to return to Japan. After it lands, emergency crews board to tend to the 374 traumatized passengers. 97 of them are casualties, 20 of them serious, with 1 fatality. 2 hours earlier, just as the in-flight meal is being served, one passenger films the chaos in the plane. The reason? An incident of clear air turbulence so severe that unsecured passengers were thrown violently up into the ceiling, smashing these overhead bulkheads and causing serious injury and even death.
Basically, when a plane hits clear air turbulence, it's like falling into a ditch. People will experience negative gravity. If you're not secured, you will hit the ceiling.
An aircraft is built to withstand very strong winds. The human body, however, isn't.
Following the incident, United changed their in-flight safety advice, warning passengers to keep their seatbelts loosely fastened at all times. A message most airlines have now adopted. It's advice that can save your life, especially if you're faced by the next, even more alarming in-flight emergency. Three times in the past 4 years in the US alone, passengers have been confronted with the terrifying sight of a gaping hole above their heads, like this one filmed on a passenger's mobile phone.
If a hole suddenly appears in the aircraft, all the air is going to charge out of it as fast as it possibly can. There'd be a huge bang, and everything that's not tied down would surge towards the hole.
An aircraft's fuselage is incredibly thin. In a Boeing 737, it's around 1 millimeter, about the thickness of a credit card. Constant repressurization can take its toll on older and poorly maintained planes.
You have the physiological effects, loss of pressure, ears popping, etc. Possible hypoxia, that is lack of oxygen to the brain, if you're not able to get enough emergency oxygen to you.
There's a certain unknown here. Why did a hole suddenly break open in the fuselage? What does that mean? Is there further structural damage that we don't know about? Is something else going to happen?
The worst-case scenario occurred in Hawaii in 1988, when Aloha Airlines Flight 243 landed with the front roof of the passenger cabin ripped away. 20 minutes earlier, the plane experienced a massive explosive decompression.
It was the result of corrosion, because they were flying in and out of Hawaii all the time, which is a very corrosive environment, salt sea air, and the maintenance. It was an old plane, maintenance hadn't been done very well.
A flight attendant was sucked out of the cabin and killed. The plane flew on with passengers exposed to the elements until it landed in Maui.
The Aloha Airlines incident, it is not something that was seen before, that much of the fuselage should come off in flight. So it is something that was a once-in-a-lifetime event.
Coming up on World's Scariest Flights, a scenic balloon flight ends in disaster for tourists in Egypt.
Oh my God!
And a fireball engulfs an airliner in Japan. This is World's Scariest Flights. You've survived takeoff, clung on through turbulence at 31,000 feet, and held your breath during a dodgy landing. As your plane slowly approaches the terminal building, you might think the most dangerous part of your journey is over. According to the Flight Safety Foundation, every year 243,000 people worldwide are injured when planes are on the ground. So as your plane slowly approaches the terminal building, it's a good job you memorize the position of your nearest emergency exit. August 2007, Okinawa, Japan. George Ishizaki had just arrived from Tokyo with his family when he found himself filming a holiday video to remember.
My son was the first person, I think, out of anyone to notice some smoke coming from one of the engines. My camcorder was in my backpack. I pulled that out. I just started filming.
This is China Airlines Flight 120, just arrived from Taipei, fully laden with 165 passengers and crew, and now rapidly turning into an uncontrollable fireball.
It's something that's not supposed to be happening. A plane isn't supposed to be on fire.
When you have an aircraft on fire, you probably have less than 90 seconds to get off that aircraft before you're going to be overcome by some of the toxic fumes.
It's now a race against time for the flight crew to evacuate the plane. This Boeing 737-800 has 8 emergency exits, but due to the engine fire, the 4 overwing exits are unusable, making the evacuation even more difficult.
There would have been a great deal of confusion in the cabin as far as what exactly was going on and what do we do, and that's where the cabin crew and the cockpit crew have to organize and get this evacuation going safely.
With no sign of the emergency fire crews, a member of the ground staff attempts to tackle the inferno with a small handheld fire extinguisher, but he is beaten back by the flames, and then the emergency suddenly intensifies.
There was this big kaboom. And we felt that shock wave, or whatever it was. It's like a big thunderous sort of jolt. It was like a movie playing in front of you. You only see things like that in movies.
As the fuel tank explodes, The pilots, who were followed emergency evacuation procedure and are the last to leave, find the rear cabin filling with flames and fumes and are forced to leap nearly 4 meters from the cockpit window.
It seemed like right when the first explosion happened was right when he was crawling out the cockpit window. And he fell from that height onto the ground.
Later, accident investigators discovered a loose bolt had punctured a 2-inch hole in the right-wing fuel tank. The fuel leak caught fire on the red-hot engines, gutting the whole plane in less than 5 minutes.
Let's pay tribute to the cabin crew for getting everybody off safely, and also the fact that passengers did listen and did do as they were told, because it's a fantastic outcome, really, of what could have been so horribly, horribly different.
Amazingly, although the plane was reduced to twisted and charred metal in just a few minutes, there were no fatalities, with only 3 people sustaining minor injuries.
In something like that, you know, for there not to have been any deaths or anything, you know, that's amazing. It's a miracle.
Despite spending billions making airliners as safe as possible and putting pilots through years of rigorous training, accidents still happen. And not just in planes. A commercial balloon pilot can be registered to carry passengers after only 35 flying hours. What started as a dream holiday flight over Luxor soon became a terrifying nightmare for Victor Bowles from Holland.
It was starting in the morning, and we go with a little boat to the other side of the Nile. My daughter was a little bit skeptic about it. She told me, I don't have a good feeling. And we thought, come on, it's the first time, it will be nice.
Also in the basket that day was family friend 16-year-old Lillian Brouwer.
Then we got up and it was, whoa, this is so amazing. The sunrise we saw, and that's just beautiful.
Enjoying their holiday balloon trip, there are 16 people packed into the basket.
And we go very high because the captain was a man who told I'm the best. And so we go higher and higher and higher.
I think he was trying to show off because we were the highest balloon of all the balloons.
Their balloon has flown higher than the others. There is a problem with the gas. It starts a rapid and unplanned descent. Smashing into a building at this height would be disastrous. 2 years earlier, 16 tourists were seriously injured in Luxor in a similar situation.
So we crossed over the hotel, and I thought, ooh, it is a little bit close. I saw the face of the captain, then I realized something is wrong here. The captain was not telling us, but we can feel something was coming and happening.
The pilot just manages to clear the buildings, but the balloon is now plummeting down even faster because the colder air over the fast-flowing River Nile has less lift, and the descent is now unstoppable.
And then you see the water coming, and it goes fast, very fast. On the moment we come into the water, there was a lot of panic. The people were screaming and shouting, and the basket was almost go over.
I thought we were drowning, thinking, please let this end well.
As the basket begins to fill with water, drenching all 16 inside, the balloon's momentum is dragging it and its terrified cargo towards a large Nile river barge. As the balloon drifts helplessly across the river, the whole terrifying scene is being captured by English tourist Rachel Crosley from her hotel balcony.
I can see there's a lot of people in the basket. It's not a few, it's full up. It's going to hit this boat. Ah! It's been on the water. Oh my God.
Oh, for crying out loud. Those poor people.
We go into it with the basket, and it was very hard, the crash, and noisy because a lot of things were broken and going glass and other things.
And the basket is swaying backwards and forwards, and I'm thinking that they're going to tip these people out onto the boat or into the Nile. It was horrendous to watch.
The warmer air above the land lifts the balloon on a rising thermal, but the basket and its 16 passengers are swinging perilously beneath it, and another crash landing looms.
We're going back into the air again, and we have to go down, but how will it be the third time?
Yeah, it's going down. It's going down very fast, though, Caroline. Too fast. Oh, no, please, no. Oh.
The balloon finally makes a third uncontrolled landing in a rice field. The basket and the pilot's pride were both battered and bruised, but miraculously, all 16 passengers managed to walk away from the crash with only minor injuries.
And then the release came. We are on the ground, we can go out, and we are alive. Can you dwars door the boat heen?
I think we're really lucky because it could have gone wrong in so many ways. I'm not going in a balloon again because it's just the memory is still there, and then I don't want to go in a balloon again.
Ballooning is not the only kind of leisure flight that can go badly wrong. According to the Civil Aviation Authority, the risk of an accident is 75 times higher on a private light aircraft than on a commercial airliner. But that doesn't deter the 30,000 registered light aircraft pilots in the UK. A commercial airliner runs on multiple engines. If one goes, you've got backup. But what happens to a single-engine light aircraft when the engine goes and suddenly you're piloting a glider? This is Elliot Rappaport, retired electrical engineer and experienced light aircraft pilot. In July 1994, Elliot took off with 2 passengers in his 4-seater Balanca Super Viking on a routine flight from Pontiac Airport in Michigan. But in less than 30 seconds, they were in very serious trouble.
At about 800 feet, I had already raised the landing gear, and the engine started to sputter.
With a catastrophic fuel pump malfunction causing his engines to run out of fuel, Elliot is rapidly losing power and height.
You look for a place to put the airplane down at. I was too low to be able to turn back and land back at the airport.
Below Elliot, Mark Gomez is on the nearby Pontiac Lake when his peaceful morning's fishing is about to be interrupted.
Can't see it.
It's right out here. At first, this plane sounded normal, but as it approached being overhead, it sounded like the motor was quitting and sputtering. Kind of figured that something might be up at that point.
Elliot only has a matter of seconds to find a safe site for an emergency landing. He manages to glide the plane beyond the trees and houses where a crash landing would be disastrous. His only option now is to ditch on the only clear flat surface available, the lake below.
I have absolutely no memory of the impact.
Did you get that? Yes. It actually looked like it was flying pretty level, losing altitude, and it just slams into the water with huge force. Parts flew off the plane. The sound was ridiculously loud. Just in disbelief that this occurred right in front of you. We gotta go check it out. We gotta go see if there's if the guy's okay.
Continuing to film, Mark rushes over to check for any survivors from the violent impact.
The screams were somewhat reassuring because that meant people were alive.
Miraculously, Elliot and his passengers have survived the crash. All three on board are badly injured, but before the plane sinks any further, rescuers are able to pull the injured men free to safety on the lakeside, where they can receive proper medical attention. All three have serious spinal injuries, but the damage would have been far worse if it weren't for Elliot's quick thinking and experience in that short but dramatic flight.
I feel that the training and the practice that I had on a regular basis was probably the reason why I came out as well as I did.
Elliot at least had the option of gliding, something that's not a possibility in one of these. No airplane pilot would ever expect a crash, but that's not the case with helicopter pilots.
There are two types of pilots, those that have had an accident and those that are going to.
Helicopters are 30% more likely to have an accident than fixed-wing aircraft. Add in the flimsy protective canopy, and it's no wonder that there were more than 80 helicopter fatalities in 2011. Make it a stunt helicopter, and the chances of death are even higher. With its three 13-foot rotor blades spinning at 471 RPM, this half-ton Sikorsky 300 has smashed into the hard Utah desert at 100 miles an hour. At the controls was former world champion helicopter display pilot Dennis Kenyon. Amazingly, Dennis has managed to walk away without serious injury.
There was an almighty crash, the biggest noise you could possibly imagine, because I'm in the centre of it, and I think my overriding feeling is that I seem to have survived. I'm all right, nothing broken. The headset that I was wearing had collapsed onto my face, and the two metal parts had cut into my skin. I had lots of blood on me, but I was all right.
Dennis is a veteran of 1,224 display flights, but unused to the high altitude and high temperatures, he made a disastrous miscalculation of air pressure.
The accident was caused by an error of judgment by myself, simply underestimating the effect of the height of the airfield, which was nearly 5,000 feet high, and the temperature of the day, which was 100 degrees. What you get is a reduction in air density, and helicopters require lots of thick air to perform properly. I didn't have it on that day. I feel very lucky indeed that I survived that particular accident.
Coming up, a hijacked aircraft makes a terrifying water landing. This is world's scariest flights. Planes landing without wheels, exploding on the runway, and ditching in water, with disaster averted by the responses of the passengers and crew.
When things are going wrong, things go wrong so quickly there isn't much time to think. So pilots have to be so well prepared that when things go badly, they can do the right thing quickly.
Even in the face of near-certain disaster, there is always some hope. Our final clip influenced another daring landing 13 years later.
I was certainly aware of the 767 water landing off the coast of Comoros. It was not a very controlled situation that resulted, but even in that one, there were survivors.
November 1996, the Comoros Islands in the Indian Ocean. Sun-seeking tourists on the beach are about to have their peace shattered. This is Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961. Its planned destination was Nairobi in Kenya. Its eventual destination, the Indian Ocean, just off the Comoros Islands.
This is one of the largest aircraft flying, and for it to come down and to land in shallow waters off a beach is just something quite extraordinary.
This tragic disaster resulted when 3 hijackers used an axe and a fire extinguisher to storm the cockpit and then demanded that the plane fly to Australia, far beyond its range.
These hijackers wanted the airplane to fly a distance that literally the airplane couldn't fly. That if they tried to do that, they would run out of fuel and ditch in the ocean.
Unknown to the hijackers, who have demanded that the plane turn away from the African coast and out across the open sea, the pilot has actually flown towards the Comoros Islands in the Indian Ocean. As the plane runs out of fuel, in the final fateful moments under attack from the hijackers, the pilot battles to bring down the plane as safely as possible, close enough to shore for rescue. Still, he's able to warn his terrified passengers to prepare for an emergency landing.
What you're seeing when the aircraft wobbles and the wing hits the water and it begins to cartwheel and break apart, that's not pilot error, that's not a botched landing. What was going on there is you had hijackers and the pilots in the cockpit together fighting for control.
125 people died in this horrific crash, at least 60 drowning when they inflated their life jackets before the impact and became trapped in the wreckage. But the crew's remarkable bravery and skill in those final moments gave 50 passengers a chance of survival. By ditching so close to the beach, rescuers were able to rush to their aid, preventing further loss of life.
The crew in the Ethiopian airplane did the very best that they could under extraordinary circumstances. I have a lot of respect for the way that they flew the airplane, and the fact that they were able to get people out was a testament to the professionalism of those pilots.
The pilot of the Ethiopian Airlines 767 that had to ditch was, quite frankly, a hero. He was a very level-headed man. He did everything he could to try and persuade the hijackers to let him do the right thing, but in the end, they were, frankly, nuts, and they wouldn't let him. He had been hijacked twice before, so he knew what he was doing, and I think his presence of mind and his ability to carry on working as a pilot after already having been hijacked is quite remarkable, and I believe he may still even be flying now.
The efforts of the pilots and their heroic struggle to bring the plane down safely was in the minds of those involved in one of the greatest landings in aviation history.
We can't do it. We're going to be done.
When Captain Chesley Sullenberger made his own landing on the Hudson 13 years later, he was all too aware of the need to get his landing on water absolutely perfect.
Many of us have seen that videotape of the 767 water landing off the coast of Comoros. In fact, I've talked to the air traffic controller who spoke with us on the radio during Flight 1549, and he had that image of that videotape in his mind when I told him we were going to land in the Hudson.
There have been many fatal accidents in aviation history, but thanks to the undeniable courage and presence of mind of this flight crew, the fact that so many people actually survived this forced water landing sets this incident apart.